Act 1, Scene 1 questions. We'll say for tomorrow, we should finish that scene today. So I'll check those questions tomorrow. I'll make sure that those are posted in Jupyter. Pretty sure they already are, but if they aren't, make sure we get those posted. Let's talk a little bit further about one of these speeches here before we continue on. So here, the last of the four options for Romeo and Juliet poetry, Romeo's speech before suicide. We looked at the first half or so last week, gotten up to line 14. So Romeo has commented on Juliet's beauty. Remember, he thinks that she's dead even though she isn't. But she hasn't gone pale yet. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag's not advanced there. And he also speaks to Tybalt, whose body is buried near Juliet's, calling him cousin, and saying he'll do this favor to him to, with that hand that cut thy youth in twain, to sunder his that was thine enemy. And after turning to Tybalt for that moment, he's now going to turn back to Juliet. So the next few lines here. Ah, dear Juliet, why art thou yet so fair? Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean, abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? For fear of that, I still will stay with thee, and never from this palace of dim night depart again. Here will I remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. Ah, dear Juliet, why art thou yet so fair? What does he mean here when he says fair? What about yet? Yet here is still. Why art thou still so fair? So what? Doesn't have anything to do with justice. Or it's not fair. Fair. Beautiful. Why are you still so beautiful? Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean, abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? What is that? Shall I believe what? That unsubstantial death is amorous. What does unsubstantial mean? Or rather, what does substantial mean?
You can take it here.
Not so much.
Something real?
Yeah, something real, especially something that, if you have a substantial amount of something, that's a fairly large amount. But here, death, he describes as unsubstantial. Death doesn't have substance to it. What does he mean here by unsubstantial? How is death unsubstantial? Ghostly here we mean. Bodiless. Death is not a living person. But shall I believe, am I supposed to believe that unsubstantial death is amorous? What is amorous? Amorous? Loving. Romantic. What does he mean here when he says, am I supposed to believe that death, that unsubstantial death, is amorous? Say it again. That death is not love, but is what? We're talking about death like the Grim Reaper kind of death. Like death as a person. It's being personified here, treated like a person. Am I supposed to believe that unsubstantial death is amorous?
Doesn't make sense.
Why?
We're supposed to be allowing that we just that. I mean,
Right. Yeah. So there's a contradiction here. He says, "Am I really supposed to believe this?" He says, "What he means is, I don't believe this. I don't believe that death is amorous." But why would we talk about death being amorous here? What is Romeo looking at and appreciating as he says this?
the body of Juliet
Right. Juliet's dead body, which is
is still
still beautiful. Normally, death's pale flag would have advanced over her features by now. But he says, maybe, not that I really believe this, maybe death is feeling romantic. And that the lean, abhorred monster, here this monster is death, lean, here meaning roughly the same as unsubstantial. Lean like, thin. Again, this is not something that really exists, it's sort of ghostly. And it's abhorred, it's hated. Death is something hated. Am I supposed to believe that this monster, death, keeps the here and dark to be his paramour? What's a paramour? Related to amorous.
hatred.
His lover. Is that what's going on here? Has death fallen in love with you and is keeping you here in dark to be his lover? Is that what? And that the lean abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? For fear of that, I still will stay with thee. So that doesn't happen, for fear of that. I'm afraid that might happen. So I still will stay with thee. And never from this palace of dim night depart again. Here the tomb is described as a palace of night, of dim night, of dark night. And never depart again. Here will I remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. Here, in this palace of dim night, the worms are Juliet's chambermaids. Here will I remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. I'll rest here and shake off the yoke. What is a yoke? Not Y-O-L-K like in an egg, but yoke, Y-O-K-E. Yoke. Go to a farm sometime. A yoke is the bar that connects an animal to what it's pulling. Often you see them in twos. They look sort of like this.
Like hairs.
They look like this. And so here in the middle, there will be a place to attach the tongue of the wagon, it's called. So we've got, let's see if I can do this justice. All right, so you've got your wagon here. There's a thing that sticks out the front. It's called the tongue. Obviously, it's got wheels. The tongue is attached to the yoke. And the yoke, these parts go over the necks of the horses or oxen, whatever they are, as they pull the wagon. That's a yoke. It's a way of attaching one or more animals to a cart, a wagon, a plow, using them to plow the ground. He says, I'm going to shake off this yoke, this burden. So yoke, that's what the thing is, but often it's used to mean a burden. My yoke is easy and my burden is light from the Gospels. Christ says, my yoke, the thing that I'm requiring you to do, like these animals are required to pull things, it's easy, it's not harsh. And my burden is light. And the weight that you're going to be carrying is light, he says. So here, Romeo says that he has this yoke of inauspicious stars, of unlucky stars. Inauspicious. Auspicious means lucky. Related to auguri. Inauspicious. Unlucky. His stars that have been aligned against him this whole time. These inauspicious stars are a yoke. They're a burden to him. They've been restraining him, holding him back, and now he's going to shake off this yoke from his world-wearied flesh, his body, his flesh, that's been made weary, it's been tired out by the world. Shake this yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-weary flesh. Okay, we'll finish that. Let's finish it now. Now as he's about to drink the potion, there's this nice transition here. He talks about shaking the yoke of inauspicious stars from his world-weary flesh, from his body, his flesh. And then he starts to think about different parts of his body. Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips, O you, the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss, a dateless bargain to engrossing death. So he says lips, he calls them the doors of breath. He says seal this bargain. This is a deal that he's striking, and he's going to seal this deal with a kiss. It's a dateless bargain. It's one that doesn't end. It doesn't have an end date to it. And engrossing death, something that's engrossing. So here, we write dateless with no end, no end date. And engrossing is either to make bigger, or here, engrossing means taking over. Engrossing death. Death just keeps growing and growing and taking over. He's going to seal this bargain, not with a handshake. This bargain that he's making with death, this deal with death, he's going to seal it with a righteous kiss, he says. Righteous. Interesting choice of word there. Notice these three body parts after saying his world-weary flesh. These are the body parts, some of the ones that he's been paying most attention to in some of the other places. Juliet's eyes, he went on and on about in the balcony scene. Her lips and hands were a theme in that sonnet when they first meet each other. Then he says, come bitter conduct, come unsavory guide. So conduct here doesn't mean the way that you behave, but it means a path that you're led along. And it's bitter. It's an unsavory guide. It's going to bring him along. The poison here is going to be his guide, but it's unsavory. It doesn't taste good. It's bitter. Thou desperate pilot here meaning the helmsman of a ship. The person who steers the ship. And it's a desperate pilot, a pilot who's given up hope. He says to this pilot, now at once, run on the dashing rocks thy seasick, weary bark. A bark is a boat, a small boat, usually. And he speaks to the man steering the boat to take your seasick, weary bark and run it on the dashing rocks, the rocks that are going to dash it, to smash it to pieces. Here's to my love. This ship, this world-wearied flesh with the yoke of inauspicious stars, he here compares to a small boat of bark that's seasick and weary. It's seasick and tired. And he tells the desperate pilot, the pilot who's given up hope, now, run your ship onto the rocks and let it be smashed. Here's to my love. And Here's to my love. It's almost like a toast there, as he's about to take this poison. I'll drink. I'd like to propose a toast to my love, Juliet. Here's to Juliet. Here's to my love. And with that toast, he drinks poison. Questions about this? All right, let's go through it. Let's finish Act 1, Scene 1 today. I think that'll probably be all that we do. So make sure you've got your questions out here. We've got a little bit more to go through in Act 1, Scene 1. Let's turn to page 19. Actually, 20. 21. Page 21. We've got 3 pages here to read of Act 1, Scene 1. And here, remember, there was this fight in the streets. Lord Montague and Lord Capulet show up. There's this discussion by Lord and Lady Montague about whether Romeo was there. They don't know what's been going on with him. And they tell Benvolio, Romeo's friend, to figure it out. So here, Romeo has just shown up. His parents decide they're going to leave so Benvolio can talk to him. And here on 21, we get this conversation between Benvolio and Romeo. Do I have a volunteer to read Benvolio?
I got you.
All right, go ahead. So you start off, Benvolio.
Good moral cousin,
Is the day so young?
but you stuck 9.
Ay me, sad hours seem long. Was that my father that went hence so fast?
It was. What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours?
Not having that which having makes them short.
In love?
Out.
Of love?
Out of her favor, where I am in love.
Alas, that love, so gentle and view, should be so
Tyrannous.
tyrannous and rough and cruel.
Yes, like a tyrant. Love is so gentle in his view. He looks so nice, but in proof, in reality, he's tyrannous and rough. He's like a tyrant, like a dictator. And Romeo notices completely off in his own world. Benvolio says, good morning. He says, wow, is it still morning? It seems like it's been going on forever because sadness makes time go by more slowly. Sad hours seem long, he says. He's completely off in his own world. Romeo then says, alas, that love whose view is muffled still should without eyes see pathways to his will. Where shall we dine? Oh, me! What fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I have heard it all. Here's much to do with hate, but more with love. Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing first create? O heavy lightness, serious vanity, misshapen chaos of well-seeming forms, feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep, that is not what it is. This love feel I, that feel no love in this. Dost thou not laugh?
No, because I rather weep.
Yeah, that's cuz, short for cousin.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. And here, Romeo notices that there was this fight. He sees the broken stuff. Maybe there's some blood lying around. And he says, here's much to do with hate, but more with love. Obviously, there's this hatred between the Montagues and the Capulets. But there is a kind of love there of Montagues for Montagues and Capulets for Capulets. And he says this is a brawling love. It's a fighting kind of love. Oh, loving hate. It's a hate that comes from love, he says. He calls it a heavy lightness, a serious vanity, a misshapen chaos made of forms of shapes that look nice, of well-seeming forms. It's a feather made of lead. It's smoke that's bright. It's a cold fire. It's sick health. This is a contradictory thing. It's still waking sleep. It's sleep that's awake. This way that the love of the Montagues for their people and the Capulets for their people has turned into sort of hate. It's a contradiction here. A feather made of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, he says. He says, what? Don't you think that's funny, Benvolio? He says, no, I rather weep. Romeo then continues at the bottom of the page, good heart at what? Top of 23 then.
At thy good heart's oppression.
Right. He says, I'm weeping because your heart is so burdened, so oppressed. Romeo then says, why, such is love's transgression. Griefs of mine own lie heavy in my breast, which thou wilt propagate to have it pressed with more of thine. This love that thou hast shown doth add more grief to too much of mine own. Love is a smoke made with the fume of sighs, being purged, a fire sparkling in lover's eyes. Being vexed, a sea nourished with loving tears. What is it else? A madness most discreet, a choking gall, and a preserving sweet. Farewell, my coz.
So I will go along. And if you leave me so, you do me wrong.
I have lost myself. I'm not here. This is not Romeo. He's some other where.
Tell me in sadness, who is that you love?
What, shall I groan and tell thee?
Groan? Why no? But sadly, tell me who.
A sick man in sadness makes his will. A word ill urged to one that is so ill. In sadness, cousin, I do love a woman.
I am so near when I'm supposed to love you.
Yep.
I am so near when I suppose you love me.
Mm-hmm. I figured that you loved a woman. All right, good markman. And she's fair, I love. She's beautiful.
A right fair mark, fair does, is soonest hit.
Well, in that hit, you miss. He says a right fair mark. So fair, he says the woman is fair. She's beautiful. A fair mark, one that's clear, a fair target can be easily hit. And he calls him fair cuz, dear cousin. So playing on this word fair here. He says, well, if it's a fair mark, then you can hit it easily. Romeo says, well, in that hit you miss. She'll not be hit with Cupid's arrow. She hath Dian's wit, and in strong proof of chastity well armed, from love's weak childish bow she lives uncharmed. She will not stay the siege of loving terms, nor bide the encounter of assailing eyes, nor ope her lap to saints seducing gold. Oh, she is rich in beauty, only poor that when she dies, with beauty dies her store.
And she hath sworn that she will still live.
Chaste.
Chaste.
She hath, and in that sparing makes huge waste. For beauty, starred with her severity, cuts beauty off from all posterity. She is too fair, too wise, wisely too fair, to merit bliss by making me despair. She hath forsworn to love, and in that vow do I live dead, that live to tell it now.
Be ruled by me, forget to think of her.
Oh, teach me how I should forget to think.
By giving liberty unto thine eyes, examine other beauties.
Yes. All right, let's take a look here at this. So Romeo says at the bottom of 23, in that hit, in that guess, you miss. She's not an easy target to hit. Why? She'll not be hit with Cupid's arrow. Cupid, right, being this like love cherub, son of the Roman goddess Aphrodite, Venus, Greek Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Right, hits people with these arrows and they fall, and he says she won't be hit with that arrow. She hath Dian's wit. Diana, in Greek, Artemis is one of the virgin goddesses. She hath Dian's wit. That's the way that she's thinking. Along the lines of Artemis, Diana, this beautiful virgin goddess. And in strong proof of chastity well armed, from love's weak childish bow she lives uncharmed. She's not affected by love's, Cupid's, weak childish bow. She says she won't put up with loving terms. She doesn't want people to assail her with their eyes, to look at her. And she won't be persuaded by money either. She won't open her lap to saints seducing gold. She is rich in beauty, only she's poor, that when she dies, with beauty dies her store. What does he mean by that? She's rich in beauty, but in what way is she poor? That when she dies, with beauty dies her store.
Her beauty stays on her body?
So, but why does the beauty die when she dies? How could it be otherwise? How could the beauty not die?
Because she's not alive, she can't get rid of it.
Right, she's dead. But why should it be otherwise? Well, Romeo says, Benvolio asks, she had sworn she would still live chaste. She'll live as a virgin. Romeo says she has. She has promises. She's made this vow. And in that sparing makes huge waste. For beauty, starred with her severity, cuts beauty off from all posterity. What is not going to happen because of this vow of she's not going to have any beautiful children. And this beautiful line, this beautiful thing will not produce any more beauty. It'll be cut off from posterity, from people that come after us. Yes. Benvolio says, forget to think of her. Teach me how I should forget to think. And what is Benvolio's advice? How should he forget about?
Look at other women.
Look at other women. Give liberty unto your eyes. Give your eyes some freedom. Examine other beauties. All right. Romeo then responds to that, line 236 there. 'Tis the way to call hers exquisite, in question more. These happy masks that kiss fair ladies' brows, being black, puts us in mind they hide the fair. He that is stricken blind cannot forget the precious treasure of his eyesight lost. Show me a mistress that is passing fair. What doth her beauty serve, but as a note where I may read who passed that passing fair? Farewell. Thou canst not teach me to forget.
I'll pay that doctrine, or else die in debt.
He says, looking at other women is a way to bring her beauty to his mind even more. Like a mask. If a woman's wearing a mask at a masked dance, the masks that kiss their brows and cover their faces remind us that they hide something beautiful. The dark color reminds us that there's something beautiful hidden there. And similarly, he says, someone who becomes blind, he that is strucken blind, cannot forget the precious treasure of his eyesight lost. He's not going to forget that he used to be able to see. Similarly, he says, show me a mistress that is passing fair. Show me somebody who's reasonably beautiful, reasonably good looking. What doth her beauty serve but as a note? It'll be a reminder to him where I may read who passed that passing fair. It will remind me of how much more beautiful this woman is than her. Farewell, thou canst not teach me to forget. Benvolio says, I'll figure it out, or I'll die in debt. And then they exit. All right, there's the end of Act 1, Scene 1. We've got here this first act. We're setting the stage for the further events. So we've introduced the conflict between the families, the sort of larger political situation with the prince's involvement, and we've learned a bit about the Capulet family. We see Lord and Lady Montague's concern about their son, that Benvolio is Romeo's good friend. He's able to talk to him about things that his parents aren't so much. We also see that Romeo is emotional. He's been going off by himself in the mornings for these walks where he sighs and weeps, and then he gets back home and he closes the doors. He stays in darkness all day long. The time seems to pass slowly, sad hours. Because of this woman who has chosen not to return his affection. Haven't yet met Juliet, haven't spent a whole lot of time with Capulets. But already here, we start to get a bit of a sense of the volatile political situation between the Capulets and Montagues, and also Romeo's own weakness. He is a flawed character, as pretty much all of our characters are in tragedy. Those flaws are going to run throughout the rest of this. All right. Scene 2. We're not going to read, but we will read the summary of it on page 26. So if you turn the page to scene 2, we'll read a little bit on the left there. So Act 1, Scene 2, 1.2, that's Act 1, Scene 2. In conversation with Capulet, Count Paris declares his wish to marry Juliet. Capulet invites him to a party that night. Capulet gives a servant the guest list for the party and orders him off to issue invitations. The servant cannot read the list and asks for help from Romeo and Benvolio. When they find out that... So notice this negotiation between Capulet and Paris. We get introduced before you even see Juliet. Paris is already talking about marrying Juliet. Capulet doesn't quite doesn't quite say yes yet, but he says, "Look, I'm having a party at my place tonight. Why don't you come by?" And he sends the guest list with the servant who, I don't know why he chose this guy for the task, but he can't read. As he's going along, he sees Romeo and Benvolio. He says, "Hey, can you guys read? Can you tell me what's on here?" And so they find out about this party at the Capulet's house that night, and they decide that they're going to crash it because they notice, and we see the list on page 31. And in fact, the servant says there, if you look down at the bottom of the page, line 85, he says, "Now I'll tell you without asking. My master is the great rich Capulet. And if you be not of the house of Montagues, I pray, come and crush a cup of wine. Rest you merry." If you're not Montagues, why don't you come by, have a drink, stop in the party. And Benvolio points out that Rosalind is going to be there. And he says, if you look at the top of 33, actually, starting from the bottom of 31, he says, "At this same ancient feast of Capulets," 33, "sups the fair Rosaline, whom thou so loves, with all the admired beauties of Verona." All the most beautiful women in Verona will be there. "Go thither, and with unattainted eye compare her face with some that I shall show. And I will make thee think thy swan a crow." Listen, these women, you haven't seen them. Go in there with an open mind, with unattainted eye, with an open mind, and compare her face, Rosalind's face, with some of the faces that I'll show you, and you'll think that your swan, this beautiful swan that you're in love with, you'll think it's a crow by comparison. Not this big, beautiful, graceful white bird, but the crow, which is not a very attractive-looking bird. It's sort of scruffy, and it makes an ugly sound, and they're kind of annoying. All right, but that's the second scene there. The conflict begins to be introduced here. We had the background here, and now we see that Juliet, which, well, she's in the title, Romeo and Juliet, that there's negotiations going on for Juliet to marry somebody who's not Romeo. And we also see that there's this party at the Capulet's house that Romeo's going to crash. Things start to escalate a bit more. All right. Let's see. In the third scene, Juliet is introduced, as is her nurse. And the nurse here is one of the more important minor characters. So the way that Benvolio is sort of Romeo's friend, his companion, his confidant, the nurse is like that for Juliet. She's sort of a combination of servant, nanny, friend. She's an older woman, had nursed Juliet when she was younger, but now she takes care of her, helps her stay out of trouble. And she's in this sort of awkward spot because Juliet is getting older. And so the nurse, she really works for Juliet's parents, but she's also close with Juliet and wants to help her out. The same way that Benvolio is sort of a go-between between Romeo and his parents. The nurse is a bit of that there. The nurse is a really hilarious character. She's basically always making raunchy jokes. Literally her first line here in scene 3 at the bottom of page 33, she says, "Now by my maiden head at 12 year old." She swears by her virginity at the age of 12. Anyway, so there's a lot of jokes along that line that the nurse makes. Anyway, feel free to read any of these scenes that we're going to skip. So we're going to skip scene 3. I'll just read the summary of that on page 32. Lady Capulet informs Juliet of Paris's marriage proposal and praises him extravagantly. Juliet says that she has not even dreamed of marrying, but that she will consider Paris as a possible husband if her parents wish her to. We see a contrast here with Juliet's character to Romeo's. The nurse is around making all these dirty jokes. Juliet's, she's 14. Actually, she's 13. But when presented with the prospect of this marriage, Juliet says, well, not something I've really thought about. This would be fine. Definitely not. Juliet's got a very different experience of love up to this point than Romeo does. Okay, but anyway, we'll pause there for today. Make sure you have the Act 1 Scene 1 questions for me tomorrow. Go work on your response papers. And please, please, please don't forget about your poems. Goodbye.